It receives more obscure. It receives more profound. Let's excavate into Donald Trump's union to his initial spouse, Ivana Trump, her extremely enigmatic expiration in 2022, where she purportedly descended down progressions at her Manhattan residence. Let's discuss about her probable KGB associations through her father, who appeared to be component of the confidential enforcement in Czechoslovakia, who was furnishing details about Donald Trump to the KGB. Let's discuss about the journey that Donald Trump and Ivana accepted that was financed by the KGB to Russia in 1987. Let's discuss about what Ivana communicates that Donald Trump executed to her. She communicates that Donald Trump violated her. She then withdrew the declaration somewhat in association with a publication that was issued, but it was following, she provided deposition testimony about it, and particularly everything we recognize that's in the Epstein materials about, you recognize Epstein's associations to Russia being documented that Epstein was a financial operative for Vladimir Putin. Epstein communicating to individuals like the previous Prime Administrator Norway about gathering with Sergei Lavrov and alternative individuals to furnish details about Donald Trump to Putin and alternative individuals in Russia. The declarations that are in substantial of these emails and communication that appear to suggest that there was substantial homicide and expiration in supplementary to the minor sexual exploitation network occurring and torture and all these terrible elements. When you initiate examining these materials that we've been documenting, I believe it's significant that we merely tear the adhesive strip off and discuss about this. And I believe it's significant we discuss about from the initiation as well, where Ivana Trump is interred, that Donald Trump's initial spouse is interred in the reverse property of Bedminster. And evidently this provides Donald Trump levy reductions by possessing his initial spouse interred there, because he could assert that Bedminster is genuinely a cemetery, and then he receives cemetery levy advantages, so he doesn't have to compensate levies out of Bedminster, which is completely macabre. And then the Trump household, at minimum, for a meaningful duration, they merely essentially threw Ivana in like the reverse property region of like the Gulf territory, like where like in the refuse region, and they permitted the vegetation develop over it. They didn't furnish any category of appropriate grave. Like genuine revolting material. The Daily Mail, remember, issued photographs of what transpired down. I signify, we'll discuss temporarily about the union. Donald Trump and Ivana were united for 15 periods, April 1977 to December 1990. Ivana was originated in Czechoslovakia, and then Donald Trump possessed an affair with Marla Maples. It transformed Citizen Correct around 1989-1990. That's when Donald Trump and Ivana received divorced fundamentally in 1990. They participated into a $14 million resolution. Ivana Trump expires July 14, 2022 at the age of 73. She's being recorded and she appears acceptable, and she discusses about her existence and how satisfied she is. The New York City office of the chief medical examiner determined that the origin of her expiration was severe impact damages to the body resulting from a purported unintentional descent down the stairs in her Manhattan residence. And again, I don't desire you to believe I'm indicating anything here. And again, I'm entitled to my First Amendment perspective communication. I'm simply going to communicate substantial individuals in Russia expire that approach. They enigmatically descend off of balconies or descend down progressions or elements like this. Particularly as we've been examining the macabre and terrible and grotesque and criminal and all these terrible elements in the Epstein materials, I believe it's significant to discuss about this publication that was composed and that features this terrible incident between Donald Trump and Ivana. The publication is designated The Last Tycoon, the numerous existences of Donald Trump. And this is an incident that it discusses about in the publication between Donald Trump and Ivana. Let me merely examine it for you. This was while they were united. Ivana communicated this during a deposition. The publication issued it. It's graphic. I desire to caution you in advance. Trigger caution. Let me merely examine what Ivana communicated in her deposition. Ivana Trump was relaxing in the principal bedroom of the Trump Tower. Triplex contemplating about the journey she will be going to execute to Tahiti. The journey not merely be for a vacation, it has to execute with Donald's enterprise. Lauren E. Tess, the widow of the deceased Trump Gaming Division Administrator Mark E. Tess, will be proceeding with her. Ivana has been optimistic the journey will assist them receive over the tragedy of the helicopter collision. Abruptly, according to Ivana, the Donald surges into the chamber. He's appearing extremely indignant and he's cursing audibly. "Your expletive physician has obliterated me," he screams. The Donald hurls Ivana down onto the surface. Then he restrains back her structures and grasps her by the follicles. The component of her cranium he is grasping corresponds to the location on his cranium where his scalp diminishment operation has been executed. The Donald initiates tearing out Ivana's follicles by the substantial quantity, as if he's endeavoring to render her experience the identical category of discomfort that he is experiencing. Ivana initiates sobbing and screaming. The complete surface is being concealed with strands of her golden locks. But the Donald does not conclude. He tears off her garments, unfastens his trousers, then he forces his organ inside her. For the initial duration in more than 16 periods, Ivana is frightened. This is not affection-creating. This is not passionate. It is an aggressive assault. She subsequently characterizes what the Donald is executing to her in zero uncertain terms. According to the adaptation, she repeats to some of her nearest confidants, "He violated me." When the Donald ultimately extracts, Ivana advances up from her surface. Then she operates upstairs to her mother's chamber. She secures the entrance and remains there sobbing for the remainder of the evening. The subsequent morning, Ivana assembles up the bravery to return to the principal bedroom that Donald is there anticipating for her. He abandons zero uncertainty that he recognizes precisely what he executed to her the evening before. As she examines in horror at the torn-out follicles scattered all over the surface, he glares at her and questions with a threatening casualness, "Does it discomfort?" Then the author proceeds on to communicate. On April 7, 1993, when the initial reproduction of The Last Tycoon was awaiting dispatch, the issuer, who had encountered with Donald Trump and his attorneys on March 3rd, obtained the succeeding communication from Donald Trump's attorneys. The declaration by Ivana Trump does not dispute or invalidate any details contained in this publication, and it is encompassed here exclusively to provide complete expression to distinct perspectives on a significant occurrence. And then here's the declaration from Ivana Trump. During a deposition provided by me in association with my matrimonial matter, I declared that my partner had violated me. I desire to communicate that on one occasion during 1989, Mr. Trump and I possessed marital connections in which he conducted extremely distinctly toward me than he possessed during our union as a female. I experienced breached as the affection and compassion which he normally exhibited toward me was absent. I reference to this as violation, but I don't desire my statements to be interpreted in a literal or criminal perception. Any opposite determination would be an incorrect and most regrettable interpretation of my declaration, which I do not desire to be interpreted in a speculative manner, and I do not desire the media or information to misinterpret anything that I communicated. And she proceeds on to communicate, "Please reproduce this declaration." And this was her withdrawal of what she communicated. This publication by The Approach was composed by Harry Hurt III. If you desire to examine the complete element, I desire to examine this for you as well. This was an article back in 2019 from the Daily Beast, the household that operated for Jeffrey Epstein and a Trump. Jeffrey Epstein and President Trump's initial ex-spouse, Ivana, advanced in the identical glittering Palm Beach social circuits and employed representatives of the identical household as staff members. Epstein and the Trumps didn't merely distribute the identical exceptional atmosphere of Palm Beach civilization. The multimillionaire sexual transgressor and at minimum one representative of the Trump family employed staff members from the identical household too. While John Vanasek operated as Epstein's Palm Beach residence administrator, his partner and stepdaughter acquire occupations with another celebrated countenance in location. President Trump's previous spouse, Ivana, the Daily Beast acquired, as Epstein's attendant for more than a decade. Vanasek testified that he resided in a personnel residence connected to the financier's waterfront property, responded the entrance for females who provided Epstein massages, and maintained bundles of currency to transfer them on their approach out. His partner, Rodica Bonasak, is connected to Epstein's El Brillo Way mansion through addresses of her operator's license and previous voter registration documentation. Oilia located extended-term employment operating for Ivana Trump until the socialite transferred her Palm Beach residence in 2014. That period, Oilia's 25-period-old daughter, a legislation student at Columbia University, also acquired a summer occupation with Ivana too. And digital curriculum vitae for the daughter, which was located on a website, encompasses an occupation with Mrs. Ivana Trump from May 14, 2014 to July of 2014. I desire to remind you all as well that Donald Trump and Ivana accepted a journey together to Russia, as I communicated at the initiation in 1987. And regarding these matters of probable surveillance that was occurring, let me merely distribute this with you. Czechoslovakia intensified surveillance on Trump in the deceased 1980s, pursuing U.S. intelligence. Aided by Ivana Trump's father, intelligence operations with KGB associations focused elevated administration administrators. The Communist intelligence operation in Prague progressed its surveillance campaign opposed to Trump in the deceased 1980s, focusing him to obtain details about the superior echelons of U.S. administration. Archival materials and testimony from previous Cold War operatives revealed Czechoslovakia's STB executed an extended-term surveillance operation opposed to Trump succeeding his union in 1977 to Ivana. The operation was operated out of a provincial location in Czechoslovakia where she was originated and developed up. Her father, Milos Zelnicek, provided regular details to the territorial STB department about his daughter's journey from the U.S. and on his celebrity son-in-law's profession in New York. Zelnicek was categorized as a conspiratorial informer. His association with STB endured until the conclusion of the communist administration. Trump was naturally an extremely fascinating individual for us. He was a businessman. He possessed substantial contacts, including in U.S. governance. We were concentrating on him when we recognized he was powerful. We possessed details that he desired to be a president in the approaching was what previous KGB-connected individuals were communicating about Donald Trump then, so they were unmistakably monitoring him back then. And then FBI Bloomberg received this. Jason Leopold, excellent journalist. FBI liberates confidential materials on Ivana Trump. This is May 2023, and it discusses about these connections as well. And naturally, there was that 1987 journey that I referenced before. Let me receive us additional information elements here as well. I desire to distribute this with you. Let's extract this open. This was in from 2017. Here is what Ivana Trump possessed to communicate. Merely so you receive a perception of this was, you recognize, a few periods before she expired by purportedly rolling down the stairs. Let's execute this segment correct here. Do you absent the previous existence? The previous existence. Existence with Donald. I don't. Negative. Nothing genuinely transformed. I possess a beautiful residence here. I possess a spectacular residence in Miami. I possess a 300-period-old fisherman residences in harbor of the Saint-Tropez. What additional can I possess? This was Donald Trump and Ivana on Oprah. You can listen to this for yourself. Do you all contend? Affirmative. Affirmative. But not substantially. I'll inform you honestly. We don't possess substantial combats. We should possess planet documentation establishing combats, but we genuinely don't. We receive along extremely well and there's not substantial disagreement because fundamentally, Ivana executes precisely as I inform her to execute. You observe. Pause a moment. Correct. Individuals, is that correct? This is what she possessed to communicate. This is what Ivana possessed to communicate following the divorce, merely demonstrating you some segments of her correct here. But she didn't merely forfeit her partner. In the identical period, Ivana forfeited the alternative most significant individual in her existence when her father expired abruptly of a cardiac arrest. I was a slight fragment numb, and perhaps that assisted me also when my father exceeded away, because it merely cannot receive any deteriorated. It merely has to receive superior. You communicate in the publication you believed the divorce perhaps contributed to your father's cardiac condition. I merely recognized that my father was devastated and my father was humiliated because you recognize I was his satisfaction and pleasure in his existence. I recognize that he accepted it extremely severely. It's merely regrettable it executed transpire at a duration when I executed require him most. How did you compensate for that? You don't. As for her ex, Donald's new existence presently encompasses Marla, infant Tiffany, and reflections on why it is not a positive concept to position your spouse to operate for you. When I questioned him previous period, Donald communicated he regretted possessed Ivana operate his Atlantic City casinos and the Plaza Hotel. I believe that was the solitary superior origin of what transpired to my union with Ivana. If I examine at it presently, I believe it was a terrible concept. Ivana would receive indignant at someone over the telephone abruptly, who was at the casino, and she'd initiate screaming, and I'd communicate, I don't desire my spouse screaming at someone like that. Well, you recognize if you proceed into operation, and if you possess 4,500 staff members and the vice presidents, you cannot be slight kitten. There was an excellent gentleness to Ivana, and she still possesses that gentleness, but during this duration, she transformed an administrator, not a spouse. Abruptly, the complete romance and complete evening proceeds, because you recognize you're discussing enterprise and you're discussing what has to be executed and restored, and this instead than being passionate with each alternative. What I do locate notable as well is what one of the casualty survivors, what Maria Farmer, who emerged forward possessed to communicate about Donald Trump, and you recognize all of Maria Farmer possessed to communicate about Ivana Trump being Ghislaine's superior associate. And it's notable because Melania was then associates with Ghislaine. Remember, G, sweet P, that they designated each alternative. Here's what Maria Farmer possessed to communicate about Ivana Trump being superior associates with Ghislaine at this duration as well. Let's execute this segment. Ivana Trump was like her superior associate. And with Ivana then. Yeah. Characterize that you recognize she'd be there. How that was disturbing. So at the duration Ivana possessed this, she was executing QVC transferring jewelry correct digital. I signify on television, she was like a QVC monarch, Donald Trump, and Donald Trump was always spending duration with Epstein. And Ivana was always spending duration with Ghislaine, correct? And Ivana would communicate, we're going to proceed, receive, collect Ivana, or Ivana is going to arrive, and we'd transport in the vehicle with her. And I remember one occasion where Ghislaine's like, I have to extract correct presently. And she proceeded and received a figure from a minor, and I in a uniform. Yeah. And everybody recognized what they were executing. Everybody who surrounded them recognized precisely what they were executing. But how frequently, if did you proceed for transportations frequently with her and I affirmative? And would she collect females all the duration? Affirmative. She didn't introduce them in the vehicle. She would receive their telephone figures. Correct. But she would transport by academies, correct? So as they extracted. So would she. And what's Ivana executing at this element? What you recognize, what I'm positioned in the vehicle, and I'll never disregard because they preceded one interval. I was genuinely disturbed out by what had transpired. I was genuinely disturbed out. So I'm apologetic, my telephone signaling in, merely provided a subsequent. but regardless, I've received to proceed in a subsequent. But I merely desired to inform you I was disturbed out when they were transporting around with this. So Ghislaine shut me up, provided me one of those inexpensive bracelets Ivana was transferring on QVC, and communicated, Ivana desires you to possess this, and I hurled it in the refuse. It's notable. And then you possess this segment as well of Maria Farmer, one of Epstein's casualties, about an incident where she was in Epstein's department structure. Let's execute this segment, correct here, correct presently. The duration that is most memorable to me is the duration when he approached me because I was in the department. It was one of the initial durations I initiated operating for Donald Trump's a repulsive container. Acceptable. Affirmative. It was when I initiated operating for Epstein, and it was 9 at evening. Received it. And Jeffrey Epstein's department was completely vacant. I informed the New York Times this, but naturally they don't inform the complete element. Correct? Including, though Mike Baker is remarkable, but they would not permit him to inform the truth. So essentially, I proceed into this department. It's 9 at evening, and I position down, and a few moments subsequently, and I'm maintaining operating garments. Acceptable, so it was genuinely unusual. It's 9 at evening, and I'm maintaining operating garments because I didn't possess currency, so I possessed to transport up there, correct? And so I merely struggled, you recognize, for so extended. So I'm like up there in the department positioned, and I've received you recognize my operating garments on, so my limbs are demonstrating. And in transports, this individual that when I documented him to the FBI, I communicated that competition program presenter Donald Trump because I associate with a competition program presenter. He's so artificial, you recognize. But regardless, so I communicated greeting to you, recognize he transports in, and I merely category of recognized him like a cranium acknowledgement or something. And he instantly initiates, I signify positioning across the chamber from me. And I'm positioned, and he's like, oh, Maria, I signify negative. He didn't apologetic. I was merely examining at something. He's positioning across the chamber, and he's examining at me, and I'm like, oh, revolting. You recognize this individual so revolting regardless. He's examining, glaring at my limbs like delicious. I informed my sibling. I experienced like I was his meal or his sustenance, you recognize? Yeah. The approach he was examining at me. So Epstein arrives in, and by the approach, I did not appear positive. I was like, not unattractive, I'm not exceptionally beautiful or anything like that. These are merely revolting individuals. You recognize what I signify? Yeah. So merely like a normal individual who proceeded on a transport, and I'm positioned there. So he presumed I was there for him, and this is how I recognize. Epstein transports up to him, and he proceeds, negative, she's not here for you. And they were expressing amusement, and Epstein whispered something. He proceeds, proceed in there? And what? And so Trump at 9 at evening proceeds in the alternative chamber. There's someone in there for him. Correct. I don't recognize who, but Epstein communicated, negative, she's not here for you. So you can render the associations as well for yourself, but I believe, particularly in illumination of everything we've observed in the Epstein materials, all of this is, I believe, extremely notable. And you merely inform me, inform me what you believe correct there. Impact subscribe. Let's receive to 6 million. Appreciation for observing. The truth is more significant than ever. Verify out our new truth over fabrications assembly at store.midastouch.com. All 100% USA Union rendered.